Have you ever stood in the heart of a roaring celebration surrounded by people who love you only to feel a sudden cold realization that you are utterly biologically alone? This is the story of John, a man who navigated the world with a perfect smile, but lived within a body that treated every conversation like a tactical mission. To his friends, John was the anchor, the reliable listener who always knew exactly what to say to make others feel seen. But beneath the surface, John's nervous system was performing a frantic, invisible dance of calibration, monitoring the pitch of every laugh and the timing of every nod. While the room vibrated with the ease of shared connection, John's internal rhythm was slipping out of sync. His breath became shallow, not from panic, but from a deep subconscious restraint that kept him on the balls of his feet. He wasn't afraid of these people, yet his muscles stayed prepared and alert, holding a posture that felt socially correct but slightly overextended. For John, time in a crowd didn't flow, it stretched oddly, like rubber pulled to its breaking point. Each exchange landed on him like sound absorbed by thick, heavy walls that refused to let the vibration through to his core. He was experiencing the specific agony of presence without resonance, a state where the self is deployed like a soldier but never allowed to settle. Driving home the depletion he felt wasn't the healthy tiredness of a day's work, but a hollow metabolic debt. It was a debt that sleep couldn't seem to repay because the expenditure was not muscular, but regulatory. This wasn't a new feeling, it was a survival strategy etched into his wiring long before he had the words to describe it. It was a lesson learned in childhood when belonging depended on monitoring the emotional weather of the room rather than just being. His brain had become a master of survival-grade connection, a mechanism that kept him safe and included, but fundamentally unnourished. Even in his most intimate moments, his system treated proximity as a variable to manage rather than a source of replenishment. He watched the world around him and saw others sinking into the comfort of shared presence while he remained suspended. The tragedy of John's life wasn't that he was disliked, but that he was highly successful at a type of connection that left him starving. He lived in the narrow bandwidth of social viability where he was useful enough to be invited but too guarded to be met. Every dinner party was an exercise in translation, converting his internal signals into a language the world found palatable. He was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, yet he was the one who was never truly there in the way that counts. Over the years, this pattern created a subtle narrowing of his life, where every invitation began to feel like a threat to his energy. The cost of his composure was the slow flattening of his internal reward system, where pleasure felt muted and dull. Belonging became a conceptual idea for John rather than an embodied feeling he could actually lean into. John began to wonder why proximity triggered expenditure instead of replenishment for a system that had forgotten how to drop its guard. He realized that his loneliness wasn't caused by a lack of people, but by a lack of physiological permission to relax. The body does not experience others as regulating agents when it is too busy accounting for them as variables. He was a master of the room, but a stranger to the relief that comes when two nervous systems finally synchronize. The self he presented to the world was a perfectly maintained garden, but the gardener was dying of thirst behind the locked gate. He spent his days maintaining connection at the level of survival, while the capacity for restorative togetherness slowly eroded. Even in silence with a partner, he felt the phantom weight of expectations he had invented to keep the world at bay. His body was a ledger of every micro-inhibition and every internal edit occurring faster than he could even think. He was efficient, he was capable, and he was quietly disintegrating under the pressure of being perpetually operational. The question that haunted him wasn't why he felt alone, but what it would feel like to not have to work so hard. He had learned that safety comes from management, not surrender, and so he continued to choose the known expense. His life was a series of successful adaptations that worked well enough to persist, but not well enough to restore. He looked at his reflection and saw a man who was surrounded by 1,000 voices, yet lived in a profound silence. John finally understood that he wasn't broken or antisocial, he was just optimized for a terrain that felt unsafe. He began the slow work of teaching his body that it was safe to be seen without having to perform the act of being. It was the hardest journey of his life, moving from a state of being surrounded to a state of being truly met. He had to unlearn the efficiency of his isolation to find the messy beauty of real human resonance. He started small, allowing his breath to drop into his belly while standing in the simplest of social lines. He practiced the art of being slightly less useful so that he could be slightly more present to himself. Slowly, the tightening behind his sternum began to soften like ice melting under a reluctant and distant spring sun. He realized that intimacy wasn't a performance, but a permission slip he had been withholding for decades. The world didn't change, but the way his body inhabited the space shifted from a defensive crouch to an open hand. He found that the people who loved him didn't need his perfect calibration, they just needed his actual pulse. John's story is a reminder that we are not meant to just survive our social lives, but to be fed by the people in them. If you recognize yourself in John's quiet struggle, know that your system is doing exactly what it was taught to do. The path home is not through more people, but through the courage to let the ones who are already there reach you. Loneliness is not a deficit of character, it is a saturation of the senses without the ability to absorb the connection. You can be surrounded and you can be met, but first you must give your body permission to stand down from the watchtower. The goal isn't to be less alone, but to be more integrated within the shared rhythm of the human experience. John eventually found a moment where being with another reduced his internal load instead of adding to the weight. It was a quiet, unremarkable Tuesday when he sat on a porch with a friend and forgot to monitor the silence. In that silence, he wasn't a scribe or an analyst or a background mind. He was simply a man breathing the same air. The debt was paid, the ledger was closed, and the air finally reached the bottom of his tired lungs. This is the evolution of the soul from survival-grade connection to the grace of restorative togetherness. The internal architecture built for uncertain terrain can finally be dismantled brick by heavy brick. The monitoring stops and the pulse of the group begins to beat in time with your own steady heart. The fear of misalignment fades away when you realize that being out of sync is part of the human dance. John learned to stop calibrating and start feeling the warmth of the room as a physical reality. His expressions became less mirrored and more authentic, even if they were quieter or slower than the rest. He accepted that his pacing was different, and that difference was not a barrier to belonging. The fog of fatigue began to lift as he stopped spending his energy on the invisible labor of social management. He found that he had more to give when he stopped trying so hard to give exactly what was expected. His relationships deepened not through more talk, but through more shared and settled silence. The hunger in his soul began to abate as he allowed himself to be fed by the presence of others. The world became less of a stage and more of a sanctuary where he could finally rest in the open. John's journey is yours too if you choose to listen to the quiet signals your body has been sending. You don't have to be the anchor for everyone else if it means you are drowning in your own isolation. It is okay to be messy, it is okay to be slow, and it is okay to be truly seen in your stillness. The architecture of your loneliness is also the blueprint for your eventual and beautiful return to the fold. Every micro-adjustment you stop making is a step closer to the resonance you have been craving. Every breath you allow yourself to take is a signal to your nervous system that the war is finally over. You are not a variable to be managed, you are a person to be known and felt by those around you. The cost of connection is high, but the cost of survival-grade isolation is much higher in the long run. Choose the vulnerability of being met over the safety of being perpetually and perfectly alone. Let the laughter of the room land where it is supposed to without trying to catch it before it hits the floor. Let your muscles relax into the chair and feel the support of the ground beneath your weary feet. The rhythm of the environment is not a threat, it is a song that you are already a part of. John is no longer just standing in the room, he is inhabiting it with the fullness of his being. The colors are brighter, the sounds are clearer, and the emptiness has been replaced by a quiet humming life. He is not just a witness to the joy of others, he is a participant in the shared breath of humanity. This is what it looks like when the body finally says yes to the presence of another soul. This is the end of the long watch and the beginning of the rest you have earned through your endurance. We hope this exploration of the silent spaces between us has brought some light to your own internal world. If you found value in John's story and the psychology of the hidden self, please subscribe to Deep Mind Portal. We are dedicated to uncovering the layers of the human mind and helping you find your way back to resonance. Thank you for your time, your attention, and your willingness to look deeper into the architecture of your soul. Your presence here matters, and we look forward to continuing this journey with you in the next chapter. Stay curious, stay grounded, and remember that you never have to navigate the deep alone. Subscribe to Deep Mind Portal and join our community of those seeking truth beneath the surface of the everyday. Until next time, take a deep breath and allow yourself the grace of simply being exactly where you are. The light is on, the door is open, and you are always welcome here in the portal of the mind. Turn off the internal monitor and let the resonance of life carry you forward into the quiet peace of belonging. The journey continues, and we are honored to be a part of your path toward a more connected and vibrant life. Good night, and may your rest be as deep as the connections you are learning to finally embrace.